Exhaustion and 11 years of minimum wage had burned every last drop of fear out of Delia Ashford's body. So, when the most feared man in Chicago pointed a nickel-plated revolver at her chest, she simply wiped the spilled coffee from her stained apron and looked him dead in the eye. "Say that to me one more time," she said, her voice flat and terrifyingly calm. "And I will end you." His reaction defied everything anyone in that diner thought they knew about Matteo Salerno. The neon sign outside, the rusty griddle, buzzed with a tired flickering hum, throwing a sickly orange glow across the rain-slicked pavement of Taylor Street. Inside, the air was thick with burnt filter coffee, old bacon grease, and the particular kind of silence that settles over a diner at 11 o'clock on a Friday night, when every sane person in Little Italy has somewhere better to be. Delia leaned her hip against the laminate counter and rolled her neck until something in it popped. She was 34 years old, 5'9", and 310 pounds of a body that had spent 2 decades being told to apologize for the space it occupied. Her orthotic shoes throbbed with every step. Her pink polyester uniform stretched tight across shoulders that had hauled more flour sacks and full bus tubs than she could count. And it bore the evidence of a shift that had somehow swallowed a second shift whole when Eli, the fry cook, called in sick. She was exhausted. Her lower back was screaming in a language only fellow waitresses would understand. And she was in absolutely no mood for anyone's nonsense. The bell over the door didn't jingle so much as it detonated. Cold night air rushed into the diner, and with it came 3 men who carried themselves like weather systems, like something the room needed to brace against. The temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees the moment the door swung shut behind them. The 2 men flanking the one in front were built like loading docks, their eyes sweeping the empty diner with the practiced, restless suspicion of men who had made a career out of expecting an ambush. But it was the man walking between them who pulled all the air out of the room, Matteo Salerno, Evan Delia, who made it a personal policy to stay out of the gossip that drifted through Little Italy like cigarette smoke. Knew exactly who he was. The Salerno family controlled the freight yards along the river, half the trucking unions in Cook County, and more high-stakes card rooms across the Midwest than anyone dared count out loud. Matteo was the family's underboss, a man whose emerald 3-piece suit did almost nothing to disguise the violence humming just beneath his skin. People said he had once had a rival's entire crew buried under the new concrete footings of a warehouse extension out by the rail yards. And nobody who repeated the story ever laughed while telling it. He was tall, rigid with a kind of coiled stillness, and his dark eyes looked like they had never once considered a joke worth the effort of a smile. Marge, the diner's actual owner, was usually asleep in the back office by this hour, and for the first time all night, Delia thanked God for small mercies. Marge would have fainted dead away. Matteo didn't wait to be seated. He walked straight to the biggest corner booth, the one with the cracked red vinyl nobody had gotten around to replacing, and slid in like he owned it. Which, for all practical purposes, he might as well have. His men took the booths on either side, facing the door out of habit rather than necessity. Delia took a breath, grabbed a fresh order pad from behind the register, and walked over. She didn't rush. She didn't shrink. She simply moved, with the heavy, deliberate gait of a woman whose feet felt like they were walking across broken glass. "What can I get you?" she said. It wasn't really a question, and there was no warmth in it. But there was no fear either. Matteo didn't look up from his phone. Gin. Neat. A dry-aged ribeye. Medium. Rare. If it comes out looking like a hockey puck, I'll have my men set this place on fire. His voice was low and gravel-rough, laced with the kind of casual arrogance that made Delia's blood pressure spike on principle alone. One ribier. One gin. She muttered, already turning on her heel. 12 minutes later she came back, carrying a tray with his drink. The ribeye. And a side of garlic potatoes nobody had ordered, but the kitchen always threw in anyway. She set the crystal coupe of gin down first. As she leaned across the table to set down the steak, one of Matteo's men, the bigger one, whose name she would later learn was Nico, shifted his weight in the booth and drove his elbow hard into Delia's hip. The impact knocked her off balance. Her considerable frame twisted awkwardly. The tray dipped, and the gin sloshed sideways in a wide, glittering arc that landed squarely across the sleeve of Matteo Salerno's $8,500 suit. Silence dropped over the diner like a curtain. It was total, suffocating silence. The kind that has weight. Matteo lowered his phone slowly. He stared at the dark stain spreading across the pale green silk of his cuff. And then his eyes came up, black and furious, and locked onto Delia's. "You clumsy cow," he said, and the words rang off the tin ceiling tiles like a gunshot. He slammed his fist onto the table hard enough to rattle every fork in the place. "Do you have any idea what this suit is worth? More than you'll clear in 5 years slinging hash browns in this dump." Delia stood there with the empty tray hanging from one hand. Nico, the man who had actually caused the spill, it was already reaching inside his jacket. An ugly little smirk pulling at his mouth. Matteo rose out of the booth, towering over her, and jabbed a finger hard into her collarbone. "Look at you," he said. "Pathetic. Get down on your knees and clean this mess up right now. Or I swear to God I'll have you cut into so many pieces they won't fit you in a standard casket." The adrenaline that hit Delia's system wasn't fear. It was rage, a lifetime of it. Compressed and waiting. It was every joke about her size she'd swallowed since middle school. Every manager who'd overlooked her for a promotion because she didn't fit the image. Every man who'd assumed her body made her an easy target for cruelty. Her aching back, her bleeding feet, the rent that was 3 days late, the sheer, casual disrespect of it, all of it coalesced into one blinding, white-hot point behind her eyes. Delia didn't back down. She stepped forward instead, using every inch of her considerable presence to close the distance until she was inches from the underboss's face. "Listen to me, you overdressed piece of garbage," she said, her voice dropping into a register that vibrated with something unhinged and utterly calm at the same time. Gus, the second bodyguard, pulled his weapon and leveled it at Delia's temple. Matteo held up one hand without looking away from her, stopping his man cold, his expression sliding from fury into something closer to disbelief. "I have been on my feet for 14 hours straight," Delia continued, her volume climbing. "My feet are bleeding through my socks. I just served you a $45 steak like it was tasting menu at some Michelin place. And your gorilla over there is the one who bumped my hip. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to sit your tailored backside back down in that booth. And you are going to wait quietly while I get a rag." Matteo opened his mouth, a vein ticking dangerously along his jaw. Delia leaned in even closer, pointing one thick, calloused finger directly between his eyes. "Say that to me again," she said, "and I will end you. I will take that steak knife on your table, and I will show you exactly how I break down a hog for parts. Are we clear?" For 10 long seconds, nobody in that diner breathed. The buzz of the neon sign outside was the only sound in the entire world. Matteo Salerno, the monster of Little Italy, sat there, staring into the furious, red-rimmed eyes of a 310-pound waitress holding a plastic serving tray like a riot shield. Then something happened that nobody, least of all Delia, expected. The tight, furious line of Matteo's mouth twitched. A low, dark sound rumbled up out of his chest. It took Delia a full second to identify it as laughter. Not a warm laugh, a dangerous one. Low and genuinely amused. The kind that raised the hair on her arms. Matteo sank back into the booth. He looked at her, actually looked, his gaze moving slowly over her flushed face, her stained apron, the defiant set of her shoulders. "Bring the rag," he said, quietly now. The rage had drained out of his voice, replaced by something colder and far more curious. "And another gin." Delia glared at him, a beat longer, refusing to be the one who looked away first. Before turning on her heel and marching back toward the kitchen, her hands shook so badly, she nearly poured the second gin all over the bar top. "I am a dead woman," she thought. "He's going to wait until my shift ends and have me disappeared into the river." But when she came back out with the rag and the fresh drink, Matteo said nothing at all. He ate his steak in complete silence, while his men sat rigid and watchful on either side. When he finally rose to leave, he walked past her, close enough that she caught his cologne cedar, rain, and something sharper underneath, like gun oil. "You've got some nerve, Delia," he murmured, having clearly read her name tag at some point during the meal. "I happen to like nerve." He walked out into the rain with his men trailing behind him like shadows given weight. When Delia turned back to clear the booth, she froze, sitting on the table, folded into a neat, precise stack, were 18 crisp $200 bills, $3,600. Beneath the stack, written across a paper napkin in elegant, slanted handwriting, was a single line: "Until next time, Delia." Delia didn't sleep that night. She lay on top of her comforter in her cramped Pilsen walk-up, staring at the water stain on the ceiling that looked, depending on the angle, like either a rabbit or a gun, and replayed the whole encounter on a loop. She thought about the way Nico's smirk had curdled into confusion. She thought about the low, dangerous sound of Matteo's laugh, a sound that had scraped down her spine and settled somewhere she didn't want to examine too closely. Mostly, though, she thought about her mother, Delia's mother. Ruth had raised her alone, above a hardware store, working double shifts of her own as a school cafeteria worker, so Delia could have new shoes every September instead of hand-me-downs from a cousin twice her size. Ruth had never once made Delia feel small for taking up space. She used to say, with a wink, that the Ashford women were built to be seen. Now Ruth spent her days in a wheelchair, in a facility, out in Oak Park, her mind drifting further from Delia with every visit, her bills climbing every month like a tide. Delia couldn't outrun, no matter how many doubles she picked up. If word ever got back to Ruth that her daughter had threatened a mob underboss with a steak knife, It would probably be the one thing that made her laugh out loud in months. Delia almost smiled at the thought before the fear came crashing back in. For 5 agonizing days, Delia waited for the other shoe to drop. Every time a dark sedan rolled slowly past her cramped third-floor walk-up in Pilsen, her heart climbed into her throat. Every time the bell over the diner door chimed, she braced for a bullet between the shoulder blades. Nothing happened. Marge. Once Delia finally worked up the nerve to confess the whole incident, to went white as a sheet and begged her to pack a bag and leave the state that same night. But Delia had a mother in an assisted living facility out in Oak Park whose bills didn't pay themselves, and a stubborn, prideful streak that refused to let some mobster chase her out of the only life she had. Ellie, the fry cook, noticed the change in her almost immediately, the way she flinched every time the bell over the door rang, the way she started keeping the meat mallet within arm's reach behind the register. He never asked outright, but he started walking her to the corner every night after close. A lanky 19-year-old with more loyalty than sense, insisting it was just easier than going home the other way. Delia let him believe that lie because the alternative was admitting how badly her hands were shaking. Even the regulars noticed something had shifted. Old Walt Higgins, who came in every morning at 6 for black coffee and the crossword, asked her twice that week if she was feeling all right. And twice she lied and told him it was just the flu going around. She hated lying to Walt. He'd been tipping her 20% since before she could legally serve alcohol. Back when she was 17 and bussing tables for Marge on weekends. But she couldn't exactly explain that the underboss of the Salerno family had promised, however obliquely, to see her again, and that every unfamiliar engine idling outside made her stomach drop through the floor. By the following Monday evening, the rain had come back with a vengeance. Delia finished her shift, wrapped her oversized rein slicker around her broad frame, and stepped out onto the slick sidewalk to walk toward the Blue Line station. She didn't make it half a block. A matte black Mercedes Maybach glided silently to the curb ahead of her, cutting off her path entirely. The rear door swung open on its own. For one wild half-second, Delia genuinely considered running, bolting down the alley between the laundromat and the shuttered bakery, losing herself in the maze of Pilsen back streets she'd known since childhood. But her feet, aching and swollen inside cheap rain boots, simply refused to move. And some deeper, more stubborn part of her refused to give this man the satisfaction of watching her scramble. Out stepped Nico, the same bodyguard whose elbow had started this whole mess. He didn't draw a weapon this time, but his posture made it very clear that walking away was not an option on the table tonight. "Get in, Delia," he said, gruff and businesslike. "I'm taking the L." She shot back, clutching the strap of her purse across her chest like a shield. "Get in the car." From the dark interior, Matteo's voice drifted out, smooth and unhurried and somehow more dangerous for it. "Get in the car, Delia, or I'll have Nico put you in the trunk. It's raining, and my patience tonight is thin." Delia weighed her options in the space of a single heartbeat to scream and possibly catch a bullet on a wet sidewalk, or climb into the car and find out exactly what this particular devil wanted from her. Scowling, she pushed past Nico and folded her considerable frame into the buttery leather interior of the sedan. The door shut behind her with a soft, expensive click, sealing her into a warm, quiet bubble that smelled of rich leather and Matteo's cologne, he sat in the far corner, nursing a crystal coupe of gin, looking even more dangerous up close. The passing streetlights sliding over the sharp angles of his jaw. "Drink," he offered, swirling the glass. "I don't drink with mobsters." Delia snapped, arms crossed tight, trying to ignore how loudly her heart was pounding. "Are you going to kill me, or what?" "Because I need to call my mother's facility if I'm going to be at the bottom of the Chicago River by morning." Matteo actually smiled, and it was a genuinely unsettling, beautiful thing. "You really aren't afraid of anything, are you? A woman your size, living check to check, threatening the underboss of the Salerno family in front of his own men. I find that fascinating." "My size," Delia repeated, bristling, her eyes narrowing to slits. "Is that what this is? Some kind of freak show for you? Get a good laugh at the fat girl before you have her disappeared." Matteo's expression darkened instantly, the amusement gone in a blink. He leaned forward. "Don't ever say that again. I don't mock you, Delia. It's the opposite. Entirely. In my world, everyone lies to me. Everyone cowers. Beautiful. Thin women throw themselves across my lap for a taste of my money. And grown men wet themselves the second I walk into a room." He leaned back, taking a slow sip. "And then there's you, 310 pounds of pure fury, offering to butcher me like livestock in front of my own men. It was the most honest thing anyone has said to me in a decade." Delia stared at him, thrown completely off balance. "So you kidnapped me to give me a compliment?" "I didn't kidnap you. I'm offering you a promotion." He reached into his jacket and dropped a thick manila envelope onto her lap. "What is this?" she asked, already tearing it open. "The deed to the Rusty Griddle," Matteo said. "Marge was very eager to sell once I offered her 4 times what the place is worth on paper. She's already looking at condos down in Naples. You are now the sole owner." Delia's jaw actually dropped. "You bought my diner." "Why?" "Because I need a front," Matteo said, his tone sliding from amused to something flatter and far more serious. "The Bianchi family is pushing into my territory. They're watching my freight yards, my card rooms, my clubs. I need somewhere to conduct quiet business. Somewhere to hold certain sensitive items where nobody would ever think to look. A run-down diner owned by a heavy-set, invisible waitress is the last place on earth anyone would search. You're a ghost to them, Delia. Society already looks straight through women like you. That makes you extraordinarily valuable to me." The insult, wrapped as it was inside a compliment, stung more than she wanted to admit, mostly because it was true. She was invisible. She had spent her entire adult life being invisible, and if I say no, Delia asked quietly. "You won't," Matteo said, smooth as glass. "Because I already know about your mother's medical bills. I know about the collection notices piling up in your mailbox. Run the diner. Hold my packages when I bring them. Ask no questions. In return, you keep the diner's profits. And I deposit $22,000 a month into an offshore account under your name." Delia turned the envelope over in her hands, running her thumb along the edge of it while the rain traced long silver lines down the tinted window. "And if I get pulled into something I can't get out of federal agents, a rival crew, Whatever comes knocking, she pressed. You handle it. Matteo said simply, as if the answer were obvious. That's what the deal is. You give me a place to breathe. I give you money, and I give you protection. Real protection. The kind that follows you home at night, whether you see it or not. $22,000 a month. It was life-altering money. It meant her mother would never be moved out of Oak Park for non-payment. It meant Delia could finally breathe. But the cost was chaining herself to a man who buried people under warehouse foundations for a living. Why should I trust you? She asked, her voice wavering for the first time all night. You could use me and put a bullet in me the second you're finished. Matteo reached across the console and wrapped one large, calloused hand gently around her wrist. The contact sent an electric jolt straight up her arm. He drew her slightly closer. His dark eyes locked onto hers with an intensity that made her breath catch in her throat. Because, Delia, he murmured, if I wanted you dead, you would already be dead. I want you exactly as you are. Fierce. Unshakable. Heavy enough to throw your weight around when it matters. He released her wrist. Though his gaze never left hers, the sedan rolled to a smooth stop directly in front of her apartment building. You start as owner tomorrow morning, Matteo said, turning his attention back to his drink. Don't disappoint me. Delia grabbed the envelope and half-scrambled out of the car. Herr Pulsehammering. She stood on the Doki Abdaus, doking the deed as the Maybach pulled away into the rainy She had just made a deal with the devil, but looking down at the thick envelope in her trembling hands, Delia realized something that terrified her, far more than the gun that had been in her face days earlier. She wasn't entirely sure she wanted to run. The transition from exhausted employee to business owner happened almost overnight. Though Delia refused to change her uniform, she still wore the same pink dress, still tied her thick hair back with the same cheap elastic, still worked the graveyard shift 6 nights a week. The only real difference was that when the rep from Golden Valley Foods tried to overcharge her for a truckload of frozen hash browns, she slammed the invoice down on the counter and threatened to move her entire account over to Dutch Boyer's Supply Co. down on Halstead. The rep cut her a new price within the hour, Marge, when she came by to sign the final papers. Cried in the parking lot, for reasons that had nothing to do with sentiment and everything to do with terror. You don't say no to a Salerno, she whispered, gripping Delia's hands so tight. Her rings left marks. You just learn to live with the yes. Then she'd hugged Delia hard, pressed a faded photograph of the diner from 1981 into her palm, and driven off toward the airport without looking back. Delia kept the photograph taped inside the register drawer, a small, private reminder of everything she now had to protect. For the first 3 weeks, the packages Matteo had mentioned never showed up. Instead, Matteo himself did. He came in every Tuesday and Friday at 1 a.m, always flanked by Nico and a second, quieter enforcer named Gus. He'd sit in the same cracked red booth, order the same gin and the same ribeye, and watch her work. They rarely exchanged more than a handful of sentences, but the air between them stayed charged with something neither of them named out loud. He watched the unapologetic way she moved through her own space, barking orders at Eli, hauling 70-pound sacks of cornmeal off the delivery truck without waiting for help. To the rest of Little Italy, she was just Delia, the loud, heavy-set new owner of The rusty griddle. To Matteo Salerno. She had quietly become the safest vault in the city of Chicago. The illusion cracked apart on a bitter, freezing night in late November. Matteo hadn't shown up for his usual Friday visit. Instead, at 1:40 in the morning, the diner door swung open, and Nico walked in alone. He looked pale and sweating despite the cold, his eyes darting toward the front windows every few seconds, clutching a plain, heavily taped cardboard box against his chest. Put this in the back. Nico murder. Bottom of the walk-in freezer. Don't open it. Delia wiped her hands on her apron and took the box. It was strangely light for its size. Where's Matteo busy? Nico snapped, already backing toward the door. Just do it. Delia. She carried the box into the walk-in and buried it under a stack of frozen patties. But as she walked back out through the swinging kitchen doors, her instincts screamed that something was wrong. Nico had been standing right beside Matteo the night of the spilled gin. He was usually cocky, cruel, painfully loyal. Tonight he'd looked like a man walking to his own execution. An hour later, the bell over the door chimed again. 3 men walked in, and they weren't Salerno men. They wore cheap leather jackets and didn't bother pretending to be customers looking at a menu. The one in front was lean, overly colonged, with a jagged scar cutting through his left eyebrow. Dominic Bianchi, nephew of the rival family's boss. We're closed, Delia said loudly, stepping out from behind the counter, crossing her thick arms, planting her feet. Dominic looked her up and down with open contempt. I don't want a burger. Sweetheart, I want the box Salerno's dog dropped off here about an hour ago. Delia didn't blink. I don't know what you're talking about. The only boxes I get are from my produce guy. And unless you're in the market for a crate of bruised tomatoes, you need to get out of my diner. Dominic pulled a snub-nosed revolver from beneath his jacket and leveled it at her broad chest. Listen to me, you fat cow. I know it's here. Hand it over, and maybe I let you live long enough to see sunrise. For one icy second, real fear cut through Delia's veins. These weren't men she could intimidate with a steak knife and a raised voice. But then the old, familiar rage came surging back up underneath it. Fat cough. It was always the same insult, dressed up in different men's mouths. You want to look, she said, her voice going dangerously calm. She stepped backward, gesturing toward the swinging kitchen doors. Be my guest. It's in the back. Dominic nodded to his 2 men. Watch the door. He kept his gun trained on her and followed her through the narrow, grease-slicked kitchen. Where? He barked. Delia walked toward the deep fryers, the oil bubbling away at 375 degrees after 6 straight hours of dinner service. She pointed past the fryer station toward the pantry, positioning herself perfectly between Dominic and the only exit. As he stepped past her, his eyes locked on the pantry door. Delia didn't hesitate. She had no gun, but she had 310 pounds of solid mass and a lifetime of pent-up fury behind it. She threw her entire body weight into Dominic's side. The impact was like a freight train hitting a bicycle. He gasped as something in his ribs cracked under the force, then flew sideways into the prep counter, his revolver clattering across the tile before he could scramble upright. Delia grabbed the heavy metal handle of the fry basket, hauled it dripping out of the boiling oil, and swung it in a wide, brutal arc. A shower of scalding grease sprayed across Dominic's face and chest. His scream was immediate and deafening. He thrashed on the floor, clawing at his own burning skin. Hearing him, the two men out front rushed to the kitchen doors. Delia was already moving. She yanked the fire extinguisher off the wall bracket, pulled the pin, and as the swinging doors burst open, blasted a thick, blinding cloud of white chemical foam directly into both men's faces. Coughing, blind, they stumbled backward into the dining room, right as the front windows of the diner exploded inward under a hail of automatic gunfire. Delia dropped flat, covering her head as glass and splinters of cheap laminate rained down around her. The roar of gunfire tore through the diner for what felt like an eternity but was, by every clock in the building, exactly 14 seconds. Then, dead silence fell. Delia. The voice was rough, ragged, with something close to panic. Matteo. She breathed. She crawled out of the kitchen, coated head to toe in fire, retardant powder, and hot grease. Matteo stood in the wrecked dining room with a smoking tactical shotgun still in his hands. His men were already dragging the bodies of Dominic's two enforcers out the shattered front door. Matteo dropped the shotgun and rushed to her, hauling her up by the shoulders, his dark eyes scanning frantically for wounds. "Are you hit? Did they hurt you?" "I'm fine," she coughed, brushing white powder off her ruined apron. She pointed a thick finger toward the kitchen doors. "Dominic Bianchi's in there. He's a little crispy." Gus, sweeping broken glass off the counter with the side of his boot, let out a low whistle when he caught sight of Dominic through the kitchen doors, half his face still weeping from the grease burns. "Boss," he muttered, "remind me never to get on her bad side." Matteo didn't answer him. He stared at Delia a moment longer, something shifting behind his eyes that looked almost like relief wearing the mask of fury, before he finally walked into the kitchen and looked down at the whimpering, badly burned man on the tile floor. When he turned back to Delia, the look on his face was unmistakable. "Raf Ave, you took down Dominic Bianchi with a fry basket," he said quietly. "He called me a fat cow," Delia said, straightening her crooked name tag. "I told you what happens when people disrespect me." Matteo actually laughed. A real, genuine sound that echoed strangely off the wrecked ceiling. The kind of laugh Delia suspected very few people alive had ever actually heard from him. For a moment he looked less like the underboss of a crime family and more like an ordinary man standing in the ruins of a diner, stunned by his own good fortune. Then the smile faded fast. "Nico sold us out. That box he brought you, it's a decoy. The real ledger's already safe." He tipped off the Bianchis, hoping they'd raid this place and kill you in the process. Tie up a loose end while he made off with my money. Delia's eyes went wide. "Nico set me up. He underestimated you," Matteo said, stepping closer. Close enough she could feel the heat radiating off him, despite the shattered windows and the freezing night air pouring in. "We all did. Except me." He reached out and gently wiped a streak of soot from her cheek with his thumb, the gesture startlingly tender against all the blood and broken glass surrounding them. "I knew the second you threatened me with that steak knife that you were different. Delia, you don't hide. You don't break. You're the strongest person I've ever met." Delia swallowed hard, looking up into his dark, intense eyes. "So what happens now? My diner's completely destroyed. It's not your diner anymore, Matteo murmured, closing the last of the distance between them. It's a liability now. But you're an asset. Nico's dead. I handled him myself on the way over here. I need somebody standing beside me who isn't afraid of anything the dark can throw at her. Somebody who holds her ground. You want me in the family? Delia asked, a disbelieving, wry smile pulling at her mouth. I don't even know how to fire a gun. Matteo, you won't need to, he said, his voice dropping to a low, husky register as his hands slid down to grip her wide hips, pulling her flush against him. You just need to keep being exactly who you already are. Duchess. He kissed her, and it wasn't gentle or polite. It was bruising, demanding, and tasted of adrenaline, gun smoke, and something dangerously close to relief. Delia's hands, still trembling faintly, came up to grip the lapels of his ruined suit jacket, and she kissed him back with all the fierce, unapologetic hunger that the world had spent her entire life telling her she wasn't allowed to have. When they finally broke apart, sirens were already wailing somewhere in the distance, growing louder by the second. Police, Matteo said, keeping one arm locked firmly around her waist. We need to move. Delia glanced back one last time at the ruined diner, the place where she had spent years being invisible, overworked, and quietly disrespected by every stranger who walked through that door. Then she looked up at the most feared man in Chicago, who was holding her like she was the single most valuable thing he owned in this world. Somewhere behind her, Gus was already on the phone barking orders for a cleanup crew and a story for the local news that would have nothing to do with the truth. Delia thought, briefly, of Walt Higgins finding the diner boarded up tomorrow morning, of Eli hearing the news secondhand and worrying himself sick, phone of Marge somewhere over the Atlantic, completely unaware her old life had just gone up in gunfire and grease smoke. She would find a way to make sure they were all taken care of. That much, at least, she owed them. She wasn't the fat waitress from Taylor Street anymore. Let's go, Delia said, stepping carefully over the broken glass, her chin lifted high. She walked out into the neon-soaked, rain-slick Chicago night, leaving the pink uniform behind for good, leaving behind 14 years of being underestimated by men who never once bothered to ask her name. The game was over, and the Queen had finally taken the whole board. If you were shocked by Delia's stand and the way she completely flipped the script on one of the most dangerous men in the Midwest, you are far from alone. Her journey from an overworked, overlooked diner waitress to an unshakable partner at a crime family's side is a reminder that real power has never come from shrinking yourself to fit someone else's comfort. It comes from owning exactly who you are. Every single pound and inch of it. Did this twist catch you off guard? Hit that like button. Share this story with someone who needs the reminder that they're not invisible. And subscribe for more real-life inspired drama every week. Drop a comment below and tell us, what would you have done in Delia's shoes?